The seamstress is still kneeling at my hem when my phone rings. Wilshire Boulevard, 11 in the morning. Ivory silk pooling around my ankles in the floor-length mirrors of Elegance Bridal. The August light cuts sharp through the windows. Outside, Los Angeles smells like eucalyptus and exhaust. In here, it smells like pressed linen and the particular quiet of women making decisions they can't take back. The number on my screen is Seoul National University Hospital. The number I gave them 5 years ago. The one I stopped expecting to ring sometime around year 3. Ms. Carter Kim? The doctor's English is deliberate, each word selected like it might break something. I'm calling regarding patient Kim Seojun. There has been a development. I already know. Before the next sentence. My body knows. He woke up. I don't drop the phone. I don't gasp. I've spent 5 years training reactions out of myself. 5 years in a world where flinching could be read as weakness and shock was an open invitation. The seamstress doesn't notice my hands have gone perfectly, unnaturally still. She's focused on the pin at my left hip. My husband is awake. My first husband. The man I watched disappear behind ICU doors. The man 3 neurologists told me to grieve. The man I spent 6 months willing back to consciousness before the universe finally, firmly said no. The man I moved on from, piece by broken piece, until I could breathe again. Until I could say yes to Marcus and mean it. Kim Seojun is awake. And if I know him, and I know him better than anyone living, he already knows about tonight's engagement dinner. He already knows about Marcus. He already knows everything. When did he discharge himself? I ask. The pause tells me what I need. This morning. Miss Carter Kim, he was strongly advised. I end the call. If you were standing in a bridal boutique at 11 a.m., wearing a dress you bought to start over, knowing the man who once told you, anyone who touches you loses the hand, was awake, mobile, and already moving through Los Angeles, what would you do? I had 4 hours before Marcus's family arrived at Nobu for our engagement dinner. My choice put every person I loved in the path of the most dangerous man in the city. This is how I got here. The Korean Mafia boss woke from a 5-year coma, discovered his wife was about to marry another man, and he went to take back his wife and their triplets. I step off the platform before the seamstress can stand. The pins in the hem don't matter anymore. Nothing about this dress matters anymore. I need to reschedule, I tell the woman at the desk. My voice is level. Nursing voice. The one I use in trauma bays when I'm telling a family their person isn't going to make it and I need them to stay functional long enough to hear me. The woman agrees to call. I thank her, leave the dress on the rack, and walk into the August heat. The drive to Hancock Park takes 12 minutes. I use 9 of them making calls. First, the children's school. Kaya, Jay, and Milo stay through their afternoon session. No early pickup. I will not disrupt their day until I understand the shape of what's coming. In emergency medicine, you triage before you treat. You do not run into the burning room before you know how many exits there are. Second, Marcus. I tell him there's a family situation. He says he'll handle the restaurant reservation, call his parents, take care of everything. He says, take all the time you need. He always says that. It's one of the things I love about him. The steadiness, the uncomplicated kindness of a man who has never needed to build walls because no one has ever tried to breach them. I sit in my driveway for a long moment after I hang up. The jacaranda tree in the front yard is still blooming, dropping purple flowers onto the hood of my car. Kaya calls it the purple snow tree. She has her father's nose, that precise, slightly aquiline angle, though she has never known him as anything other than a photograph on the mantle, and the name I made them learn in Korean before they learned it in English, Appa. I met Kim Seojun 8 years ago in a trauma bay at Cedars-Sinai. His man came in first, a bodyguard named Sung, 2 bullets in his left shoulder. Arterial bleed so serious the paramedics had him packaged before they cleared the ambulance bay. The official story was a mugging in Koreatown. I knew within 30 seconds it wasn't. I grew up in Compton. I know the difference between a robbery that goes wrong and a message that gets delivered. The wound placement told me everything. Robbery shooters aim center mass, fast and unthinking. This shooter had placed both rounds with clinical precision in the non-dominant shoulder, disabling, not killing. The kind of accuracy that communicates we chose not to. A warning. I stabilized Sung. I noticed the inconsistency and kept it to myself because I had learned early what happened to women who spoke up about the wrong things in the wrong rooms. Seojin came the next morning, not in the loud, conspicuous way men with certain kinds of power sometimes arrive, flanked by associates, filling the doorway with ego and expectation. He came alone, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and he asked a nurse's assistant to point him to the woman who had saved Sung-si's life. He stood in the hallway outside my station and bowed, not the shallow head bob of obligation, but a deliberate, genuine 30-degree inclination. Then he straightened and said in accented but precise English, "I pay my debts. Whatever you need." I told him what I needed was for him to leave before hospital security noticed a man with 3 visible bodyguards in the parking structure. He smiled. It was the most controlled smile I had ever seen. Rationed, precise. Like every expression he permitted himself was calculated against a budget. He left. He sent flowers the next day, then a card, then, inexplicably, a job offer. Private medical director for his restaurant group. Nothing dangerous on the surface, at a salary that would have erased my student loans inside a year. I said no. He respected that. He came back anyway. I knew what he was. I am not going to pretend I didn't. I had done my research, the quiet kind, through whisper networks and careful listening and the particular attention you develop when you grow up somewhere that requires it. Kim Seojin, 3rd-generation Korean American. Legitimate owner of record for Mayam Restaurant Group, 3 commercial properties in Koreatown, a logistics company at the Port of Long Beach, and enough valley real estate that his name appeared in city planning documents alongside architects and city council members who smiled too warmly when they said it. Also, according to people who said his name at a volume slightly below normal conversation, the operational head of the most disciplined criminal organization in Southern California. A man whose code was simple and absolute. I pay my debts. I protect what's mine. Betrayal is death. I should have run. I didn't, because he was the first man who had ever told me exactly what he was before asking me to trust him. "You should know who you're having dinner with," he said at our 3rd meeting. "I don't operate in half-truths with people I respect." He told me. Not everything. Not numbers, not names, not the architecture of the specific operations, but the shape of it, the honest geography of his life. And then he waited. I thought about Damon, my brother who died at 14 on a Tuesday afternoon in Compton because I was 17 and afraid to name the car I had seen idling on our block for 3 days before it happened, because I told myself I was wrong, that I was seeing things, that speaking up would make something worse instead of preventing it. I stayed quiet. The car came back, and now Damon is a name on a headstone and a weight I have carried for 16 years. Seojin was offering me something Damon never had: clarity. The thing he was, stated plainly, without performance or pretense. No waiting to discover the truth after it was too late. I said yes to dinner. We were married 11 months later, in a ceremony that was half traditional Korean formality. The handbook, the bowing rituals, the precise hierarchy of who sat where and who poured for whom, and half my mother's Baptist church aesthetic, and somehow, improbably, it worked. I wore red. His grandmother gave me a longer bow than protocol required by exactly 3 seconds, which I learned afterward was a formal signal of her approval so significant that 2 of Seojun's senior lieutenants changed their posture when they saw it. My life inside his world was not what people imagine when they picture a mob wife. I was not decorative. I was not kept in a gilded room and told not to ask questions. He had married me, I came to understand gradually, because I was useful. Not in a cold or transactional way, but in the way that only someone who has spent their entire life thinking 3 moves ahead can recognize and value another strategic mind. I read people the way I read patients. Vitals, micro expressions, behavioral tells, the things bodies do when words lie, the things people reveal when they think no one qualified is watching. He used that. I let him use it because in exchange, he told me the truth, kept me informed, kept me protected, and treated every observation I offered as intelligence worth acting on, not as a curiosity from his wife, but as data from someone whose eyes he had learned to trust. Then, the ambush. 6 months into my pregnancy, triplets which the ultrasound revealed at 12 weeks, and which Seojin received with a silence so complete and total that I thought for 3 minutes he was displeased, until I finally registered that the stillness was not coldness, but overwhelm, and that his hand on my arm had not moved in 90 seconds. His car was run off the 101 near the Cahuenga Pass. The official report said ice on the road. In August, in Los Angeles. I wasn't in the car. That single fact is the only thing that kept me functional in the months that followed. He had sent me home early from Mayhem that evening because I'd been on my feet for 6 hours and my ankles were swollen, and I'd said I was fine, and he'd said quietly, absolutely, Hajime, Imani, go home. We fought about it. I lost. I went home angry. He got in the car. The damage patterns in the impact photos were wrong for a single vehicle accident. I insisted on seeing them. I am a trauma nurse. I read injury mechanisms. It is not something I can turn off. And the crumple zones told a different story than the official report. The point of impact was too localized, too precise. A targeted strike, not a slide. I said this to the investigator assigned to the case. I was gently redirected. Grieving wife. Traumatized. Understandable misinterpretation of evidence. I was not misinterpreting anything, but I was alone, 7 months pregnant with 3 babies, and no one was listening, so I filed it somewhere in the back of my mind where I keep things that aren't finished. The triplets came in November. I named them Kaya, after my mother's middle name, Jay, after Seojin's father, and Milo, because he had told me once in a quiet moment late at night at Mayhem, when the restaurant was empty and he had poured his own drink for once, that he had always liked the name. A small, strange thing to remember. I remembered it anyway. I raised them. I came back to Los Angeles and went back to emergency nursing and built a life that was quieter and smaller and survivable. I met Marcus Webb 3 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. A cardiothoracic surgeon with kind eyes and steady hands and no complicated history. And when he proposed 6 months ago, I said yes with full knowledge of what I was choosing. Uncomplicated. Safe. A life that would not require my children to learn what to do if someone rang the wrong kind of doorbell. I did not expect Kim Seojin to wake up. I go inside the house. I change out of the fitting clothes. I stand in the kitchen and make coffee I don't intend to drink, and I stand at the window looking at the jacaranda tree, and I try to think clearly about what comes next. The doorbell rings at 12:47. I open it. He is thinner than I have ever seen him. The illness is visible in the hollows beneath his cheekbones, in the new sharpness at his collar. His hair is shorter than it used to be. They cut it in the hospital, probably, for procedures. The clothes don't fit him right, which tells me someone bought them for him this morning, because his wardrobe is still in Seoul. And 5 years of muscle atrophy means nothing in his closet would fit anyway. He is still, impossibly, more composed than any man has the right to be after 5 years of unconsciousness. His eyes are the same. Exactly the same. Dark and still and reading everything simultaneously, always 2 moves ahead. Jagia, he says. The endearment comes out careful, like it costs him something. Like he is not certain he still has the right to it, but is using it as a question, rather than a claim. Don't, I say, and step back to let him in. He sits at my kitchen table and looks around the house, the way he looks at everything. The focused, cataloging attention of someone processing information, not admiring decoration. I watch him take in the children's drawings on the refrigerator, crayon dragons, lopsided houses, a family portrait with 5 figures that Kaya made last month, and which contains a person she labeled Appa in careful Korean characters she'd taught herself from my old flashcards. His gaze moves to the 3 small backpacks by the front door, the framed school photo on the sideboard, 3 faces, his nose, my eyes, his jaw, my mouth, a perfect accidental blend. He stares at that photo for 4 full seconds. I have counted his silences long enough to know their taxonomy. 4 seconds is grief. "Tell me about them," he says. His voice is rougher than I remember. Vocal cord atrophy, which is predictable given the duration of intubation, but hearing it is still strange. Kaya talks first in any room and does not stop until she has gotten a reaction from everyone present. Jay thinks before he speaks, sometimes for so long that you assume he has forgotten the question, but he hasn't. He's building an answer worth giving. Milo cries at every sad film and will not admit he's crying. I pause. They are 5. They have seen your photograph every day of their lives. They say goodnight to it. The muscle in his jaw tightens fractionally. He looks at the table. "You kept my name," he says. "I kept it for them, not—" I stop myself before I finish that sentence in a direction I'm not ready for. "The crash wasn't an accident. You said that on the phone." He looks up. He has always responded well to directness. It was one of the first things he told me he valued, and one of the few compliments he ever gave me that felt earned rather than strategic. "The crash was arranged," he says, "and I have been awake for 31 days. The room feels very still. 31 days. I regained consciousness approximately 6 weeks before the medical records reflected. Motor function returned slowly. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't communicate my awareness. But the medications being administered—" He reaches into his jacket, a gesture so deeply familiar that my chest does something complicated, and sets a folded medical printout on the table between us. I pick it up. My eyes move across it automatically. 7 years of reading charts in under 30 seconds is not a skill you lose. Sedation protocol, midazolam, fentanyl, propofol. Dosages consistent with the pharmaceutical maintenance of suppressed consciousness in a patient who might otherwise surface. Not palliative care, not standard coma management. Someone has been actively, deliberately keeping this man under. The authorization signature at the bottom of each dosage adjustment reads, Dr. Han Min-soo. I turn the second page. Dr. Han Min-soo's employment at the facility ended 3 years ago. He died of a cardiac event at 48. His obituary names a wife and 2 daughters. Someone has been signing a dead man's name for 32 months. Someone with access to Seo-jun's medical directives, the institutional authority to issue pharmaceutical orders, and a reason to keep Kim Seo-jun in a state that was neither life nor death. Who holds authority over your medical directives? I ask. My voice is still level. I'm very proud of that. His eyes don't change. One of 2 people. My lawyer. A pause with weight in it. Or my named medical proxy. Who did you name? Choi Dongwon. The coffee mug is still warm in my hands. I set it down carefully because if I don't, I will drop it. Dongwon, Seo-jun's first cousin. The man who sat with me in a Seoul hospital waiting room for 3 weeks straight when the triplets were newborns in the NICU. The man who flew to Los Angeles to help me move, who carried boxes up the stairs and assembled cribs at 2 a.m. and held Milo when I couldn't hold all 3 at once. The man the children call Sam Chan Uncle and run to at Christmas. The man who, 8 months ago over tea at my kitchen table, had said with such quiet, genuine-seeming warmth, "You deserve to be happy, Imani. Seo-jun would want that for you." I had cried. I had actually cried. I had taken it as permission, as release, as the last brick removed from the wall I'd been building around my grief for 4 years. Not yet, I say. My voice has changed slightly and I can't fix it. Don't say his name yet. I need to... I breathe. The dosage records. I need to verify these independently. I know, he says. That's why I brought them to you first. The children come home at 3:15. The bus drops them at the corner, and I watch from the window as they come up the front walk. Kaya first, already talking, narrating her day to no one and everyone. Jay behind her with both backpack straps fastened like a very small expedition leader. Milo last, dragging a stick along the hedgerow as though testing the structural integrity of every leaf. I have 45 seconds to decide what to do. Seojin stands beside me at the window. He is completely, utterly still. The front door opens in an explosion of noise and dropped backpacks and the smell of sunscreen and school. Kaya is halfway through announcing that a boy in her kindergarten class said dragons aren't real and therefore he is wrong and needs to be corrected, when she sees the man standing in her kitchen and stops. I watch 5 years of observational intelligence work behind her eyes. She looks at him. She looks at the mantle photograph. She looks at him again. Her head tilts by 3 degrees. "Appa," she whispers. Jay and Milo have piled in behind her and gone equally still. 3 small people with varying ratios of their parents in their faces, staring at a man who has only ever been a word and a photograph. Seojin goes down on one knee. I don't know what that costs him physically. 5 years of muscle atrophy, a body still remembering how to hold itself upright. But he goes down, and he stays down, and he says something to them in Korean. I catch enough of it to know it is gentle. An introduction folded around an apology, offered without excuse. Milo starts crying immediately. He has no defenses for this kind of thing, and never pretends otherwise. Kaya walks forward and puts both her small hands on Seojin's face, the way she handles anything she needs to understand with direct physical investigation, and says, with the plain verdict of a 5-year-old, "You were sleeping a really long time." "Mian-hae," he says quietly. "I'm sorry." I leave the room. If you've ever had to sit with the realization that someone who held your children's hands, who cried at your table, who helped you choose what to keep and what to let go, someone you trusted entirely and without reservation, was a constructed lie from the first day, tell me how you breathed through it. Because I stood in my bathroom with the tap running and water on my wrists, and I made myself be a nurse instead of a wife. Triage, evidence, facts first, feeling later when there is time. I accessed the hospital's medical record system with my nursing credentials. I verified every dosage record on that printout one by one. 32 months of pharmaceutical maintenance, 32 months of dead Dr. Han Min-soo's signature on authorization forms, consistent in pen pressure and letter form, used after his death with the confidence of someone who had practiced it. Every record confirmed, every unauthorized signature identical. And I had just said yes to a man Dongwon had introduced me to, whose acquaintance Dongwon had arranged, whose path had intersected mine at a fundraiser Dongwon had mentioned offhandedly 3 times before I agreed to attend. A man positioned to receive me once I was out. I turned off the tap. I dried my face. I went back to my children and their father and made dinner for 5 people for the first time in 5 years. Dongwon arrives at 6:15. I did not call him. I see from Seojin's expression when the doorbell rings, not surprised, not even particularly reactive, that he expected this. An organization the size of Mayhem has eyes and signals everywhere, and a man like Kim Seojin discharging himself from an overseas hospital and appearing in Los Angeles is not a quiet event. What I observe when Choi Dongwon walks through my front door is this. He is too prepared. His expression as he enters and sees Seojin passes through something. And here I apply the same clinical attention I give to patients in trauma bays, to families receiving news, to anyone whose face is the most reliable data source in the room. Genuine shock produces a specific physiological cascade: pupil dilation, a fractional drop of the jaw, a half-second processing delay before language catches up to perception. The autonomic nervous system cannot fake this sequence. It happens or it doesn't. Dongwon's pupils are stable. His jaw is set. His language arrives precisely on cue. "Hyungnim," he says, crossing the room and embracing Seojin with the warmth of a man who has been preparing this performance. "Hyungnim, you're awake. Thank God. We've been so worried." His left hand, resting briefly at Seojin's shoulder as he steps back, taps 3 times against the fabric. I have known Choi Dongwon for 8 years. I watched him negotiate with a rival organization's representative across the private table at Mayhem 3 years ago, and his left hand tapped 3 times under the table when he confirmed that the inventory figures were accurate. I was the only person in the room watching his hands instead of his face. Seojun noticed me watching, asked me afterward what I had seen. I told him. He reran the figures. We made significantly more money that quarter. Dongwon taps when he lies. Gamsahamnida, Dongwon si, Seojun says. Formal. The distance in that formality would be invisible to anyone who hadn't known him for years. They sit at my table, my kitchen, my house, my children watching a film in the next room at a volume slightly elevated, because Kaya wanted to give the adults privacy, and this is how she interprets the concept. And I stand at the counter, and I watch. Seojun asks routine questions about the organization's operations. Dongwon answers smoothly. The hand stays still. Then Seojun says, with the exact calibrated casualness of a man who never says anything without intention, I'd like to review the medical facility's records from the last 3 years. The left hand taps. Once, twice, 3 times. Of course, Dongwon says. Whatever you need, Hyungnim. I pour tea. I keep my face exactly as it was. When Dongwon has gone and the children are in bed, I sit across from Seojun at the kitchen table in the quiet that follows the end of a very long day. He looks exhausted in a way unrelated to the hour. The specific exhaustion of a body rediscovering what it means to be vertical after 5 years of horizontal existence. He should be in a hospital. He knows this. He's not going back. Your brother, he says. I look up. Damon. He says the name the way I used to say it, like it deserves its full weight. You told me about him when we were first together. What happened? It has been a long time since anyone outside my family said Damon's name as though it mattered. It lands somewhere still raw. Drive by, I say. He was 14. I was 17. I don't elaborate. Most people don't need more than that to understand the dimensions of the loss. You saw the car. 3 days before. I knew what it meant. I didn't say anything because I was 16 years, and it still catches. I was afraid of what would happen if I was right. But you weren't afraid enough to stay quiet when you thought I'd been deliberately hit, he says. I tried to say something then, too. Nobody listened. I'm listening now, he says. I look at him across the table. The Sajangnam, the face he shows, the organization, the controlled authority, the 3 moves ahead calculation, that version of him is still present, still visible in the structure of how he holds himself. But there is something underneath it tonight that I don't think I've ever been allowed to see clearly. Something that 5 years of enforced stillness may have excavated against his will. A man who has had nothing to do except exist and hear, stripped of every performance and every strategic position, learning something about the weight of what he'd chosen. I never stopped, he says quietly, in the coma. There were periods, not always, not consistently, but periods where I was close enough to the surface to hear fragments, a voice, a word, not enough to respond to, but enough to know. He pauses. I heard you tell Kaya the dragon was real, that it lived in the purple snow tree. My throat is tight. I thought you should know that, he says, in case it mattered. 3 days after Seojun arrives at my door, I find the second thread. I'm finishing a night shift at Cedars when the encrypted phone, the emergency line Seojun left me when we married, which I have kept charged and silent in my hospital locker for 4 years out of some instinct I could never fully justify, receives a message from a logistics contact in the organization. He says he has been monitoring the account transfers at Seojun's instruction since the morning Seojun discharged himself. There is an irregular pattern. Monthly transfers to a holding company registered in Vancouver, amounts precisely calibrated to fall below the reporting threshold, running for 4 years and 2 months. I pull the records on a secured terminal in the hospital's administrative office. The holding company is registered at a mail service address in Richmond, BC. The beneficiary name is a shell. 3 degrees of corporate layering that takes me 40 minutes to untangle. But the original authorization signature on the founding document for the transfers is not hidden at all. It is Dongwon's. He has been building an exit, not dramatically, not the kind of skimming that triggers an audit or creates a visible hole, but consistently with the patience of a man who has always thought long-term. 4 years of careful extraction adds to a number substantial enough to start over anywhere on Earth. He wasn't keeping Seojin under merely to consolidate power. He was keeping Seojin under while he built the means to eventually walk away from everything he'd taken. That night, I spread it on the kitchen table like chart rounds. Account records, the Vancouver company registration, the forged physician signatures laid against the timeline of Dongwon's access to the medical directives. 3 columns of evidence that form a single, irreducible conclusion. Seojin looks at it for a long time. How? He says. Not is this accurate. Not are you certain. Just the one word. How? Meaning. Which detail? Which thread? How did you pull it? His hand, I say. He taps his left hand 3 times when he lies. He did it in front of me the first night, when you mentioned the medical records, and he thought only you were watching him. I pause. He forgot I was there. Seojin is quiet. You learned his tells before I did. I learned everyone's tells. It's what I do. A longer silence. Then, Imani. Marcus Webb. I look at him. Dongwon introduced you. He says it simply, like a diagnosis, the kind where the naming of it is worse than the suspicion. Yes. I've had him investigated since I arrived. Marcus Webb is entirely what he appears to be, a good man with no knowledge of any of this. I want to be clear about that. His voice is level. I can see the effort that costs him. But the introduction was engineered. The fundraiser, the timing, all of it. Dongwon wanted you occupied, committed, and legally moved on before I had any chance to wake up. Because you are... He stops. Starts again. You are the only person in this world who cannot be bought, intimidated, or eliminated without consequence. You see things no one else sees. He needed you out. I think about Dongwon at my table over years of Tuesdays. Seojin would want you to be happy, meaning be happy somewhere I can't see you, somewhere you stop being a risk. My hands are flat on the table. I keep them that way. My phone rings. Marcus. His voice wrong before the first full sentence. Tight, very controlled, the specific vocal compression of someone managing significant fear while trying not to alarm the person they are calling. Imani. I'm physically fine. I need you to know that first. But there are 2 men in my apartment, and they've asked me not to call anyone, and The call dies. Seojin is already on his feet. If you've ever had to stand between the man who came back and the good man you tried to replace him with, knowing that both of them are now in danger because of you, tell me how you made yourself move instead of freeze. Because I had about 4 seconds before Seojun made all the decisions, and I have spent 5 years learning that I do not hand over my decisions. I grabbed my coat. He makes 2 calls in the time it takes me to get my coat and the emergency bag from the hall closet, the one I've kept packed since the night on the 101, 5 years ago, because some instincts don't become obsolete just because the crisis pauses. Cash, documents, a change of clothes for each child. Seojin sees me grab it without breaking his conversation, and something in his expression shifts by a fraction I almost miss. The first call is clipped Korean. I catch Mayum, Hajima, Jigum, don't, now. The second is to a man named Lieutenant Han, who's been loyal to Seojun since before my time in the organization, and who has, apparently, been the one monitoring Dongwon's accounts at Seojun's instruction from the moment Seojun regained enough function to communicate in writing. Gaja, Seojun says to me, let's go. Children. Han's wife, Ji Young. She's been safe housing for 11 years, and Dongwon does not touch her. It would cost him too much in the organization to move against her. She was at our wedding. A pause. She gave Kaya a blanket at the hospital. The yellow one she still has, I was told. The yellow blanket. Kaya has slept with it for 5 years. I thought it was from my mother. I have been given information that has been kept from me, assembled and held and waited on for 5 years by a man who was supposed to be unconscious. I file this for later. Right now, there is only Gaja. Fine, I say. Let's go. Mayhem Restaurant is quiet at this hour. The front dining room closed, the kitchen prep staff gone, the valet station dark. But the private room in the back is lit, and Dongwon is there, which is exactly where Seojun expected him to be. It has always been his room as much as Seojun's, perhaps more so these last 5 years. The room is exactly as I remember. Lacquered table long enough for 14, the hanging scroll calligraphy that Seojun's grandmother chose, the smell of premium doenjang and good whiskey, and something underneath both of those that is just the specific scent of a room where serious things happen. I have been in this room for negotiations, for celebrations, for one memorably tense dinner with a visiting delegation from New York that ended with handshakes and Seojun's hand at my back as we left, his voice low and even saying, "You saw something. Tell me." 6 men I don't recognize stand against the walls. 2 I know from the inner circle. Both Dongwon's appointments, both placed in their positions during the last 5 years, which I note, and one positioned against the far wall, arms folded, standing with the particular stillness of someone ready rather than relaxed, who is wearing black gloves. Inside, August in Los Angeles, under warm restaurant lighting. I look at his hands. The right glove sits wrong at the wrist, too much material, a small ridge at the inner wrist where the fabric doesn't lie flat against the skin. Padding underneath. Bandaging. He has an injury on his right hand, and he is concealing it, which means the injury reveals something he cannot afford to have revealed. Why conceal a hand injury in a professional setting? If you belong here, if your presence is legitimate, you bandage the wound openly and explain it in 2 sentences. You hide an injury only when the injury is itself evidence. Evidence of where you were, what you did, what you can be connected to. A right-hand injury carefully wrapped on a man standing in Dongwon's formation 48 hours after 2 men entered a physician's apartment in Brentwood. He was in Marcus's apartment. Seojun is speaking to Dongwon, calm, direct, the voice he uses when he has already decided the outcome and is offering the other party the courtesy of choosing how they arrive at it. The room's attention is entirely on that confrontation. Nobody is watching the man against the far wall except me. I cross the room at a diagonal, unhurried, toward the bar ostensibly. I stop at Seojun's right shoulder, close enough that our arms nearly touch, and say quietly, "Far wall, right hand. He was in Marcus's apartment. Left pocket, the weight is wrong. He's carrying." Seojun's cadence doesn't break. He finishes his sentence to Dongwon, says "Meom chwoyo" in Korean in a tone that is not a request, and makes a movement with his hand so subtle I almost miss it. Lieutenant Han moves. 15 seconds. The man against the wall is on the floor, Han's knee between his shoulder blades, the recovered weapon laid on the lacquered table where everyone in the room can see it. Dongwon looks at me. "Igayot-bwa," he says very quietly. "Look at this. Not anger. Something closer to wonder, which is somehow worse. Even now. Even after everything. You used me." My voice is steady. I have been practicing this particular steadiness since I was 17 and standing at my brother's grave. You used my grief and my children in 4 years of Tuesday visits, and you kept my husband sedated with a dead man's signature, and you positioned a man in my life to make sure I would stay gone. You used all of it. You were supposed to be free, Dongwon says, and the thing that makes it terrible is that he means it. Genuinely, specifically means it, not as a manipulation, but as a belief he has held so long it has calcified into conviction. You were never supposed to be here. You were a trauma nurse from Compton who married the wrong man and got pulled into something that was going to destroy you eventually. I was trying to... That, Seojun says, was not your decision. Dongwon turns to him. And across the lacquered table, in the room where they have both been present at 100 decisions that shape this organization, something passes between the two cousins that has nothing to do with power and everything to do with what was under the power. A relationship that started somewhere ordinary, two boys in the same family, that became something distorted by years of proximity to an unequal inheritance. You were always first, Dongwon says, not with venom, worse, with exhaustion, with the specific tiredness of a grievance so old it has become part of the furniture. From the beginning, no matter what I built or managed or held together, you were always first. I know, Seojun says. It comes out quieter than I expect, not soft, but honest in a way that is clearly costing him. I didn't see how much that cost you. That was my failure. A beat. The room holds very still. But you kept me from my children, Seojun says. The quiet is gone. What is underneath is absolute. For 5 years, you kept me from them. There is nothing, no grievance, no history, no excuse that touches that. Han moves Dongwon toward the exit. The logistics of what follows, organizational justice, the financial recovery from Vancouver, the question of how much of this ever reaches law enforcement, are above my clearance level, and I am content with that. What I know is simpler. The thing that arranged Seojun's near death, the thing that maintained it, the thing that has been quietly managing the shape of my life for 5 years. It has a face and a name now. Named things are survivable. Marcus comes to the house the following evening. He is unharmed, exactly as Seojun promised. He walks through my front door and into a kitchen that currently contains 3 5-year-olds doing homework, a recovering Mafia boss drinking barley tea under Dr. Park's instructions, and approximately 40% more reality than Marcus Webb has been asked to absorb since we met at a fundraiser 3 years ago. He takes it in. I watch him do it. That same quality of his that first made me trust him. The steadiness, the refusal to flinch. And I see him understand what this is before I can explain it. He looks at Seojun. He looks at Jay, who has his father's exact eyes and is watching Marcus with the calm, patient observation of a child who processes everything before speaking. He looks at me. I think I understand, Marcus says. Marcus, I want you to know that I meant every part of it. He says it directly, without self-pity, which makes it harder. I'm not telling you what I feel isn't real, because it is. I can see what this is. He looks at Seojun once more, and I see him register the way Seojun's hand rests at the back of my chair. Not touching, not claiming, but there. Proximate in the way that gravity is proximate to a body in orbit. I can see that I was handed a story that was already in the middle of a different chapter. I don't know what to say to that. I'm not sure there is anything to say. Marcus straightens. He looks at Seojun, and there is something in that look that I will think about for a long time. 2 men measuring each other across a kitchen table with 5-year-old triplets as the only witnesses. No weapons, no performance, just 2 people who both love the same woman through very different parts of her life. Take care of her, Marcus says. Not to me. To Seojun. Seojun holds his gaze without flinching. I pay my debts, he says, and she is not a debt. She is the whole account. Marcus nods once. He looks at me, the look of someone making a clean decision and honoring it, and leaves. I stand in my kitchen and listen to Kaya tell Milo that his dragon doesn't have enough legs, and Milo tell Kaya that dragons can have however many legs they want because they're dragons. And I breathe. 3 nights later, the children are asleep, and Seojun and I are at the kitchen table at midnight, which has become our place. The unremarkable geography of our ongoing renegotiation. He looks better. Still thin, still carrying the last 5 years and the new sharpness of his face, but better. Dr. Park has come twice. The slight unsteadiness in his walk is nearly gone. The roughness in his voice has smoothed to something almost familiar. You're not the same, he says. No, I agree. Neither am I. I look at him across the table. The Sejangnim is still there. I can see the architecture of him, the strategic infrastructure that doesn't dismantle itself just because it's been put through something extraordinary. But there is something alongside it now that wasn't there before, or that was there and I was never allowed to see it clearly. Something that 5 years of enforced stillness has excavated. He is less certain, and that, the visible uncertainty, the human margin, is the most honest version of him I have ever been offered. This doesn't go back to what it was, I say. I need you to hear that before anything else. I know. I am not going to be managed. I won't be kept. I decide what risks I take. I protect us, all 5 of us. And that includes making my own calls about when and how. I look at him steadily. What happened in that restaurant? I need you to understand that wasn't me helping you. That was me doing what I do. I'm going to keep doing it. You have saved my life twice, he says. Once in a trauma bay when you didn't know my name. Once across a table in Koreatown with 6 armed men in the room. I am not laboring under any misapprehension about what you are capable of or what you are owed. Good. A silence settles. Comfortable in a way that surprises me. It is too soon for comfortable. We have years of reconstruction and grief and renegotiation ahead of us, and the question of who commissioned the original ambush on the 101 remains unanswered, because Dongwon was the hand but not the architect, and Han is already pulling the thread on who gave the order. There is more coming. There is always more coming in the life I married into, and apparently never fully left, but it is comfortable. The way certain things fit even when they are broken, the way certain silences between 2 people contain more information than most conversations. Jagiya, he says, like the first time at my door, careful like a question dressed as an endearment. I'm asking for something I don't deserve to ask for. You're not asking, I say. You're here. That's not quite the same thing. He waits. I'm not saying yes to everything, I tell him. I'm saying stay. Let's find out what yes looks like now. For all 5 of us, the version that starts here, from this. His exhale is very quiet. It contains 4.5 years of everything he could not say. Gamsahamnida, he says, formal, precise, sincere in the way that only things offered formally can be sincere, like the formality is itself the measure of how much it means. Don't thank me yet, I say. Kaya has 17 questions for you at breakfast. She wrote them down. I saw the list. The corner of his mouth lifts. Still rationed, still precise, still the most controlled smile I have ever watched anyone produce. I know, he says. She gets that from you. If you've ever had to choose between the life you built out of wreckage and the life the wreckage came from, knowing the man who came back is dangerous, knowing the man you're leaving is good, knowing your 5-year-olds are watching every version of you and learning something from each one. Tell me what you'd do. I chose the ghost, the one who came back. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Han found the name behind the order on the 101 that night. Seojin went very still when he heard it. Not Dongwon's name. Someone older. Someone with a longer claim on the organization and a different kind of grievance. Someone neither of us had thought to look toward because we had been too busy looking at what was in front of us. That is a different story, for another night.